Streets of Rage 4 is a collaborative effort from Dotemu, who published Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap, and the developers of Windjammers 1 and 2 on the modern consoles. Guard Crush Games, who were behind the game Streets of Fury, which was kind of an homage to the Streets of Rage series, and Lizard Cube, who brought us Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap. Personally, I've never been a big fan of the Sega Genesis, and I don't think that's any secret. But there are a few games that I truly do love on the console, and my favorites are Streets of Rage 1 and 2. I always had hope that the series would continue beyond its 16-bit iterations, and there were hints that it was going to happen here and there, but never did. Then, out of nowhere, an announcement hit the internet. An announcement that at first confused me a bit, then worried me. And after seeing who were bringing this new game to us, and seeing some initial screenshots, this excited the hell out of me. I've been a fan of beat-em-ups for quite a while, and it's definitely toward the top of my list for favorite genres. My favorite games/series in the genre are definitely Final Fight, some of the TMNT games, and of course, Streets of Rage 1 and 2. We'll not talk about 3. We just won't. With that experimental soundtrack that just took things right off the rails, and some of the gameplay choices in 3, it just never really tickled my fancy. Something that set Streets of Rage 1 and 2 apart from just about everything else on the Genesis/Mega Drive were the fantastic soundtracks that pushed the meager sound chip to heights that no one would ever expect it to reach. Composers Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima not only pushed the hardware above and beyond where anyone could have expected, but the tracks themselves would quickly become iconic and are instantly recognizable to this day. Heck, I would still love to find the first 2 soundtracks on vinyl, and I know they're out there, but they're really tough to find, unfortunately. I'll be honest, the art style that I was seeing in the initial screenshots looked a bit like old web browser games from years ago, mainly made in Java. But once some gameplay videos emerged, my concerns started evaporating immediately. But sure, it looked like a Streets of Rage game, but would it actually feel like the games that I've been playing for years? Now that I've played Streets of Rage 4, a lot, mind you, I can answer with a definitive yes. The moves that you've known for so many years, like tapping attack and jump to hit someone behind you, or being able to push forward twice with attack to hit your enemies even harder, and even possessing the ability to call a screen-clearing attack, well, almost clearing the entire screen depending on the character, it's all here. Movement feels accurate, and is different per playable character. Axel feels like Axel always has to me, even down to the weaker jump and attack when compared to his compatriots. Even things like reach distance and general walking speed have made the transition from the original games. And even though the game mechanics have expanded upon those in previous iterations, to me, this feels more like a faithful Streets of Rage than even 3 did. Building upon this expansion, enemies now have more of an identity, especially with the additional animations and sounds now available. Boss characters in particular have more personality and unique traits, which really sets them apart from the general grunts that you'll encounter throughout the game. And speaking of those grunts, if you've ever played any of the past entries in this series, you'll definitely recognize a few of them, and all are very faithful to the originals, right down to their actions and patterns, and yes, even sometimes their cheap moves. Visually, the game is almost deceptively stunning. The reason that I say deceptively, though, is that if you've only seen screenshots, you'll get a nice surprise when you finally see it in motion. The amount of color, animation, and minute detail fill the screen immediately. All available in 4K resolution even. One thing that surprised me especially is the lighting, which wasn't expected in this cel-shaded style that we thought we were used to. And everything casts shadows, which don't move with different light sources. Attention has also been applied to the environments, with other character interactions taking place in the backgrounds at times, including a rumble between the corrupt cops and the gang that you're battling. Frankly, it's a beautiful game with a pleasantly unique style that blends old and new wonderfully. What makes me happy is that it doesn't fall into that all too familiar transition from 2D pixel art to fully polygonal, like other classics that are brought into modern times. Something that a lot of people have been wondering about Streets of Rage 4 is the audio. And obviously, especially the soundtracks. And Streets of Rage 4 doesn't disappoint. Composers for the original games, Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima, have returned to join forces with Oliver Derivière, who is leading development of this new soundtrack, and it works. Obviously, they aren't hamstrung by the many limitations of the sound chip in the Sega Genesis, but even with those limitations removed, the soundtrack still retains a similar feeling throughout. It offers a wonderful thematic similarity with Streets of Rage 1 and 2, and again, let's not talk about 3, okay? While also adding new flavor that fits perfectly with what's happening in each level. Beyond that are the sound effects and other environmental sounds, and once again, a lovely balance between old and new emerges, giving you the right amount of nostalgia and uniqueness, never pandering to the player's nostalgia for cheap pop though. Multiplayer is something that I'll be able to talk about but not touch on because I wasn't able to do it myself in this early pre-release form. But there are a couple of options that exist if you'd like to play Streets of Rage 4 with your friends. Locally, up to 4 people can join the fight, and new to the series, 2 people can play cooperatively online. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't able to try this, so I can't factor this into the review, but it is cool that these options exist. And I'd like to take advantage of it, especially the online cooperative. One last item to discuss are the options to make the audio and or visuals retro. Doing so for the audio switches to the original soundtracks, which is great. The visual shift, though, is a bit more complex. Instead of actually shifting the art to actual pixels like other games that offer this kind of feature, Streets of Rage 4 instead seems to simply apply one of 2 retro filters. One that adds a pixelated look for both characters in the backgrounds, with the second filter additionally adding a CRT-like scan lines. Both look fine to me, even though I just don't hold any nostalgia for scan lines anymore. But the pixely filter honestly doesn't do much for me personally. It's cool for a while, and I like that they've included it, but as far as I've been able to find, you can't shift between the modes on the fly by just hitting a button like other games that are rooted in the 16-bit or earlier days, and that's something that I usually appreciate. I do like, however, being able to separate switching between audio and video modes. So you can choose, for example, to play with the classic soundtracks but still using the modern visuals, and vice versa. So in conclusion, Streets of Rage 4 has really met and probably even exceeded my expectations. Every aspect of the development has been done so with respect and reverence to the original trilogy. It's not an easy game by any means, but it's not excessively difficult either. It's simply challenging. This also isn't simply some fan-made walk down memory lane, and everything is dripping with polish and attention to detail. It holds such a great balance between old and new in both the audio and visuals, and I've had a smile on my face every time that I've played so far. Let's just be thankful that they didn't include anything from the Streets of Rage 3 soundtrack. Alright? So from my point of view, this is an exceptional game, and it definitely gets a 9 out of 10.
Feuer!